Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And we are continuing our review of Joel Richardson's book, Mystery Babylon, Unraveling or Unlocking the Bible's Greatest Prophetic Mystery. My voice is still very, very weak, but I'll continue to do the very best that I can. This is video number 5. And, you know, I've interacted with Mr. Richardson on Twitter a little bit over the last week or so. It's been a little bit distressing. Mr. Richardson said that I am condescending, I'm arrogant. I really don't know why he would say such a thing. I've gone out of my way in my videos to say that my review and response means no disrespect to him whatsoever. It is simply an examination of the claims that he makes in the book. Now, in sharp contrast to that, he makes comments in his book that could certainly come across as condescending, and he certainly condemns the views of others, challenges them, says they're wrong. So I'm really doing nothing but what Mr. Richardson does. And what was distressing about our exchange was I pointed out where I had stated repeatedly that I mean no disrespect to him, and he responded something like, well, I know what your words say, but that's not what they mean. And as I responded, well, in other words, you're claiming to know my heart. And that's really distressing. So I've invited Mr. Richardson to meet me in formal public debate or on YouTube in debate to discuss these issues. We will do so collegially. We will do so with respect, with decorum, and decency. And that's the way I always conduct myself in debates. Anyone can watch any of my debates that are on the internet, and you'll know that's how I conduct myself. Well, with all of that said, as I have continued to read Mr. Richardson's book, and by the way, I think I said this before, his examination of some of the myths and fables and the theological claims that were surround Nimrod and the supposed connection with Revelation, he really honestly does a good job of dispelling and refuting any of that connection. With that said, one of the things that just literally jumps off the page at me as I go through the text is how Mr. Richardson completely ignores the actual language of Revelation. Now, does he cite some text in Revelation? Well, of course he does. But what I mean by this is that from Revelation 1:1 all the way to Revelation chapter 22, we find one statement after another that the fulfillment of Revelation was at hand. Let me read to you Revelation 1, this is good old King James, Revelation 1, 1-3, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to him to show to him things which must, now the word must there is Greek word dei, D-E-I, must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John, who bare record of the word of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ, of all things that he saw. Blessed is he who reads, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written, for the time is at hand. Now, folks, starting there, until the book finishes in Revelation chapter 22, we find one statement after another that fulfillment was at hand. In writing to the 7 churches, Jesus said to those historical churches, behold, I come quickly. In the opening of the seals or the bowls or whatever, we are told, you know, one plague is over, the other comes quickly. Notice Revelation chapter 22 as we are given the vision of the new heaven and the new earth. He said to me, that's the angel, these things are faithful and true, and the Lord, the God of the holy prophets, sent his angel to show to his servants the things. Now, what's the antecedent to that? What are the things? The new heaven and new earth. The things which must shortly be done. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's really no way to ignore this, and yet that is exactly and precisely what Mr. Richardson does in his book. Now, perhaps I've missed it, okay? I haven't read the entirety of the book yet, but I've scanned the table of contents, or I've gone to the table of contents. I do not see where Mr. Richardson does any kind of linguistic or grammatical examination of all of these time statements in the book of Revelation. And so I would ask you, now, let me point this out. Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God the Father gave to him. Now, we are told in Matthew 24 and verse 36, but of that day and hour. What day and hour? The day and hour of the Lord's coming. The second coming. In other words, the fulfillment of the book of Revelation. Of that day and hour knows no man. Okay, we are told, okay, the time is unknown. Well, it was unknown to Jesus when he spoke those words in Matthew 24. But now in the book of Revelation, what are we being told? Pardon me. We are told that the Father, who knew the day and the hour, was now revealing to the Son, who was to reveal to John and the churches, these things must shortly come to pass. The time is at hand. Thus, what Jesus did not know in Matthew 24 was now, when John wrote Revelation, being revealed by the Father who knew the day and the hour. What was the Father who knew the day and the hour revealing to Jesus, who was to show John to show to the churches? The Father was revealing to Jesus, these things must shortly come to pass. The time, and by the way, the word time there is the Greek word kairos. The appointed time is at hand. What did Jesus say? Revelation 22 verse 6. Behold, I come quickly. What did Jesus say? Revelation 22 and verse 10. He told John, do not seal up the vision of this book, for the time is at hand. Now contrast that with Daniel. Daniel was given a vision of the time of the end. Daniel was given a vision of the resurrection, which is Revelation chapter 20. Daniel was told, seal up the vision of this book, for it is a long time away. Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, and again in verses 9 and 10. So here is Daniel, who wrote in the 6th century BC, told to seal the vision. From Daniel until John, let's just round it off, was 500 years. Daniel was told, seal it up, it's a long time away. John, who repeated Daniel's prophecies, was told, do not seal the prophecy, the vision of this book, for the time is at hand. Do you see that temporal contrast? The fulfillment of Revelation was so near, so pressing, so urgent, so imminent, that John wrote to the churches, Jesus told him to write to the churches, let the wicked remain wicked. Look, folks, if Revelation hasn't been fulfilled, then the church's message ought to be, let the wicked remain wicked. Is that, for instance, the message of Mr. Richardson's teaching? Well, if Revelation will not be fulfilled until the destruction of Islam at the second coming in our future, then he ought to be proclaiming, let the wicked remain wicked. Revelation 22 verse 12, once again, behold, I come quickly. Nowhere in the book of Revelation, nowhere are we told. Now look, these things are not near now, but they will finally be at hand in the last days. No, John was living in the last days. Peter said so in Acts chapter 2, 17 and following. And thus it is an incredible, incredible hermeneutical oversight and fallacy when Mr. Richardson completely overlooks this vast number of statements in the book of Revelation that said its fulfillment was at hand, coming soon, shortly, and quickly. And, unless I missed it, to not even mention that language, to completely ignore it, and then to jump forward 2,000 years and counting and say it applies to us today in our world and in our time? Does audience relevance not mean anything? Folks, this is a humongous exegetical and hermeneutical failure of Mr. Richardson in his book, Mystery Babylon, Unlocking the Bible's Greatest Prophetic Mystery. How do you claim, and I say this with all respect, how do you claim to be doing an exegetical and hermeneutical investigation of the book of Revelation when you ignore what the book of Revelation says at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end about when it was to be fulfilled? I'm sorry, folks. That is not good hermeneutic. That is a presumptive approach to the book of Revelation and, in fact, ignoring the testimony of the book. And look, it will do no good whatsoever to say, oh, well, one day is with the Lord, 1,000 years as a day, because after all, it was the Father who knew the day and the hour, who was revealing the time to Jesus. Revelation doesn't say, now, nobody knows because one day is with the Lord. No, the Father who knew the day and the hour said, these things must shortly come to pass. Well, in my book, Who Is This Babylon?, I have an extensive, in fact, it's one of the most extensive linguistic, topical, thematic, textual studies of the time statements in the book of Revelation and the objections that have been given to try to, ignore them, try to make them go away, try to say, well, they didn't apply to John's day, they apply to us. I examine every major objection that I've heard in my years of ministry, and I show that linguistically and grammatically and contextually that those objections will not stand. God can tell time. God has always told the truth about time. And let me tell you something. If you go to my website, donkpreston.com or BibleProphecy.com, and you order the book, Who Is This Babylon?, and you say that you saw the video on Mr. Richardson's book, I will include, free of charge, my little book entitled, Can God Tell Time? Free of charge. All right? Well, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. You have a safe weekend. Lord willing, we'll see you on Monday.